Hi, I'm Chris M. Slawecki. I'm the Senior Digital Copy Editor for DIA, and I'm here at our Global Annual Meeting 2023 in Boston with François Torche, who is co-founder and Chief Product and Technology Officer for CluePoints. So first of all, François, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
May we ask you to begin by explaining what you do at CluePoints?
Sure. So I used to be the CEO until the end of last year, and I decided to come back to my first and only love, which is the product. So I've been taking the responsibility of Chief Product and Technology Officer. I'm developing the software that is behind CluePoints. So CluePoints is a platform. It's a risk-based quality management platform made of different products. We have been evolving the products for the last 10 years, so it's pretty advanced and suite of products now. And I had no more fun doing the management side of things and managing people and scaling up the company. So I decided to come back to my first love, and I'm managing a team of about 120 people now, which are related to research, software development, operations in terms of platform deployment and stuff like that.
Excellent. I'd like to focus the next part of this conversation on data. There's been a lot of talk at the annual meeting here about artificial intelligence, natural language processing, and the like. And everyone recognizes that your algorithms that build those things are only as good as the data you put into them.
Yeah.
So we have that conversation going on over here. We have remote and decentralized clinical trials happening over here.
Yep.
And there seems to be a growing school of thought that the technologies used for remote data capture in decentralized and hybrid clinical trials can potentially erode the quality of the data those tools are built to collect.
100%.
So I'd like to ask you to kind of expound on that 100% answer a little bit.
Sure, I'm happy to. So first of all, when we talk about risk-based quality management and we talk about collecting the data, there is a certain trend in industry to say we have to simplify clinical trials. We want to remove the complexity of the clinical trial. The reality is that we're doing the exact opposite. We are designing umbrella trials. We're designing studies where you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 all together. We're recruiting thousands and thousands of patients, hoping to have like different arms, and so we're doing the exact opposite. And I think we have to. So adopting a risk-based approach is not about trying to say we're going to try to reduce complexity. It's about accepting that increasing complexity and addressing that complexity by using the right tools. What do I mean by that? When you collect data, when we used to collect CRF data a long time ago, I mean, we're talking about, I don't know, maybe hundreds of data points for a number of visits, like 10 or 20 visits, and for maybe 500 patients, 600 patients, sometimes far less. Now we're talking about the eCOA, the ePRO. I'm not even talking about DCT, which is still like a myth. DCT, if you ask, and my colleagues that are DCT vendors would disagree, but when you look at the number of companies who have actually implemented real DCT trials, there are probably just a few. Now, if you simplify DCT to be eCOA, ePRO, yes, you're going to see a number of companies that are collecting already that kind of data. We're talking about tons of data. We're talking about large volume of data. The best example I can give you is the interest of the regulatory bodies around audit trail of those data.
Sure.
Since 2017, 2018, FDA, EMA, all the regulatory bodies in the world are asking, what are you doing with reviewing those data? Those data that have not been managed by the site staff, but by patients, or supposedly by patients. And I would not say the F word, because the F word equal fraud is a sensitive one.
Yes.
But obviously, you see that we have in those data atypical patterns that can sometimes be hard to explain. How do we find those patterns? How do we analyze those data? We don't need AI. AI is fake. AI doesn't exist. So let's make that very clear. I invite everyone to type on Google AI is fake, and you will have tons of examples of why it is fake. AI doesn't exist.
Okay.
So if you think of that Stanley Kubrick movie 2001 Space Odyssey, how? It doesn't exist. ChatGPT is not how.
Right. Great point.
So we are talking within CluePoints, we're not talking about AI. We're talking about deep learning and machine learning, which is basically we ask a server, a machine, to learn something, and that machine will learn that thing. AI would imply that machines have been trained and have been learning from each other. We're not there yet, and we're far from being there.
Right.
So how can you analyze those data? You can analyze the data with deep learning, machine learning. We're doing that, but you can also use more traditional methods like what we've been doing for the last 20 years, where we invented the smart engine, the statistical engine. You don't need to have always machine learning and deep learning as being the response for a business issue. Very often, when I talk to a client, they say, I want to use deep learning, machine learning. Why?
Yeah. For what?
Why?
Yeah. No.
Because it's a hype, because it's a hot topic, and because everyone wants to be the one that has been implementing some sort of deep learning or machine learning within their company. Let's not underestimate the power of statistical tests, and let's see how we can complement statistical tests with machine learning and deep learning. And that's what we're doing within CluePoints, where so we are using, just to explain briefly what we do and how we do it. So the statistical tests are there to compare data collected by one site against all the other sites, or one patient against all the other patients, or one country against all the other countries. The point is that we're going to compute statistical score that are going to tell you at what point a site is becoming really atypical in the way certain data has been collected. Certain data, what do we mean? We're analyzing EDC, lab, ECG, ePRO, eCOA, all the variables, and we have a series of about 15 statistical tests that are going to look at the proportion of missing data, the average value, the standard deviation, something pretty simple, traditional.
Mm-hmm.
The score that is computed is telling you that site on these data points with that statistical test is really atypical compared to the rest. An example, adverse events. We are counting for the number of adverse events by patient visit. Very traditional key risk indicator, very traditional test. We're going to look at one site, and we're going to see how many adverse events have been reported by that site by patient visit. We're going to do that for each site. The machine is going to compute an expected value, which is more or less the average of across all the sites.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're gonna compare each site against that average. And that site maybe has been reporting 3 or 4 times more adverse events than the other sites. We are converting that into a statistical score. It's a p-value behind the scene. We don't want to confuse people, so we got rid of the term p-value. So we say it's a score, and we say if the score is higher than 2, your site is, from a statistical standpoint, atypical compared to the other sites.
Right.
And that's the whole point of RBQM. RBQM and our vision of RBQM is providing detecting tools to help someone. We're not expecting AI to replace people. We're expecting someone to review what has been identified as being a potential issue within a clinical trial, within that data point, to further investigate, to drill down, to look at the data. So the statistical test is not going to make a decision for you. Deep learning, and it's not going to make decision. It's going to make suggestions. It's going to say, you're adopting a risk-based approach. So you're not going to look at everything. You cannot look at everything anyway. Your audit trail data, good luck. But let's run something that is going to highlight, among the tons of data that you have, some clusters, some potential interesting stuff. And I give that to you, and I say, make an assessment of that. Tell me if it's an actual issue, yes or no.
Right.
And if it's an issue, what do you want to do about it? Do you want to send your CRAs on site? Do you want to make a phone call to the patient? Or I don't know, whatever you want to do, but this is the action that you're taking. What we've been doing, because we're doing that for almost 10 years. So on the platform, we have more than 1,000 clinical trials now. So we can learn from that. We can learn from what the study team decisions were in the past, and maybe suggest to the new study teams, this is something that has been done when we've seen a lack of variety in the bioscience. That study team made that decision. Do you want to make that decision? So that's one actual concrete use case of the use of deep learning and machine learning to learn from the past to suggest to the other in the future. Another example, risk assessment. So you're asking study teams, as part of the RBQM, you're asking them to perform a risk assessment. What could go wrong? What are my critical data? What are my critical processes? What are my risks? How can I mitigate those risks? this exercise is a very essential exercise. It helps to develop the critical thinking. It's think before you act. But it means that now we are sitting on, I think, on 500 or 600 risk assessments by different study teams. Now we can start. It's work in progress. I'm not saying it's in production, but we can say, tell me what is your indication, tell me what is your phase, tell me what it, and based on that, we can say, well, the machine is suggesting that you should be reviewing those risks, those critical processes, those critical data. That's a very interesting use case of the use of deep learning and machine learning.
Thank you. And the next question, you've actually sort of headed in this direction. How do we, there's tension everywhere. No opportunity comes without its challenges. But how do you solve the tension between remote collection, digital collection, collecting data that way, and then ensuring the quality of the data? What are the kind of the steps you can take? What are the things you can look for?
So there are several challenges behind that. There is first a challenge of combining those data that are collected remotely with data that are not collected remotely, that are site related. So there is a need for having some harmonization of those data, which sometimes can already be a challenge. I would not pretend that we have the best solution to do it. We have a solution to harmonize the data, but this is an essential part of the process because you cannot just analyze those data independently from the rest of the data that are collected about those patients. So there is the data ingestion, the data harmonization aspect, and then you have, to the point I was making earlier, you can then use statistical methods, deep learning, machine learning to process those data and reveal what is potentially atypical. It's not new to CluePoints. We're doing that for many, many years, but people are getting there. It took us sometimes to convince people that this was the right thing to do. And now I think it's no more a question of are we right or wrong, but this is, we're doing this for a very long time.
There seems to be a prevailing thought that you can have a lot of data, like real world data, big data locked in insurance and healthcare databases. But if you have a lot of data, it's not good. Or you can get really good clinical trial data, and then the response to that is, well, how representative is it of the population? It's good, but it's not big enough. So I would just love to hear you talk that out a little bit. Do we have to make that decision? Do we either have a lot of data or good data? How do you see us closing that gap?
Well, first you're going to have to define to me what is good data.
Thank you.
Good enough, good for what purpose? I remember I was very early stage in the CluePoints journey back 2012, 2013. We're trying to, really very beginning, we're trying to convince study teams, you should be looking at this, you should be looking at that. And I remember once we presented the outcome of the algorithm to a study team, and we found atypical data in vital signs, which happens more often than we think. So basically the systolic and diastolic blood pressure across different visits for different patients was still the same. There was potentially, I'm very mindful of, but potentially there was some laziness at the site, the investigator, that said, rather than measuring again systolic and diastolic blood pressure, I might just want to copy the data from the previous visit. Might be. And again, this happens more often than not. The interesting thing is we presented that to the study team and they said, yeah, it happens all the time.
The F word.
And so what are you going to do? Nothing. Yeah, it's not critical. It's not critical data. Why are you bothering collecting data if it's not critical? So to answer your question, I prefer to have less data, but good data that you can rely upon, than more data, but completely uncertain of the quality of those data, the consistency of those data.
I'm interviewing you 3 years from now. What's the biggest change in the next 3 years that you see on the horizon for risk-based quality data management? where the opportunities and where might we get stuck?
So RBQM at DIA used to be a hot topic until probably 3, 4, 5 years. Then it became less of a hot topic because it was more not adopted yet, but it was, I mean, everything has been told about what we could do with RBQM. What do we see now? DCT. It's all about DCT. And I think that in 3 years from now, we're going to have DCT or RBQM applied to DCT. That's where I see that most of the talks will be in 3 years from now. How do we manage the quality of DCT data?
I think that's the answer I was hoping you to give. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you'd like to share before we close?
No. Thank you for having me.
Beautiful. Well then, I can't thank you enough. The best part of my job at DIA is being able to learn something new every day. And I am grateful that you took time to speak with me. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this with our audience. This was a tremendous interview, François. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. For DIA, I am Chris M. Slowacki.